Hey you guys, today I am going to talk about verbal abuse. Specifically, I'm going to share 5 sneaky verbal abuse examples so that you can learn how to spot these things in your relationship. This is specifically for you if you're feeling confused after an interaction with your spouse and you're left feeling bad, but you're not really sure why, because you know that you're not dealing with overt abuse. Like, they're not name calling you, they're not humiliating you, they're not putting you down directly, so it kind of goes under the radar. And the reason that I'm sharing these today is because a lot of times we don't really recognize abuse for actually what it is, because the person who's doing it appears to be vulnerable, or they don't see their power. They might feel one down. So, and in this sense, I really do think of all violence comes from disempowerment and that feelings of victimhood and hurt and feeling one down. So it feels justified to the person who's doing it. It feels like it's the only way that they can protect themselves. And so I really look at abuse as behavior that stems from not being able to own personal power. Because whenever we make another person responsible for our feelings, or we don't see the power that we have, we always run the risk of crossing the line as a way of trying to stop what someone else is doing, or control what they're doing, or fix something outside of ourselves, which just reinforces that external locus of control. And a lot of people will lash out in a relationship because they perceive themselves to be offended or hurt or put down or disrespected or less than. And if you think about it, this is how child abuse happens. It's a distortion in the mind, and I'm just using this as an example, but it's a distortion in the mind of the adult that the child is doing something to them, right? That the child actually has more power than they actually have. And so it feels justified to act out or yell or put them down or shame them or even physically hurt them, and to look at it as, well, I need to show them, I need to teach them, because what they're doing is so grievously wrong to me, and they're manipulating me and they're disrespecting me. And so the line gets crossed, and you're not really seeing the power that you actually have. So you always are veering into verbal abuse if you find yourself one down and trying to offend from the victim position. But I want to share these so that you can really tap into that inside yourself if you're doing it, or especially if your partner is doing these things. Because once you can spot these things and name them and become mentally clear about what's going on, you can put a dead stop on it. You can stop getting pulled in, you can stop being manipulated, and take care of yourself. So I'm going to go over these one by one. The first example is constantly invalidating everything that you say. Now, this is not just a one-off. This is what I'm talking about is like frequent, ongoing, and pervasive invalidation. So, for example, let's say you say, I really like that movie, and they say, I hate that movie or that director. You say, this tastes really good, and they're like, I never liked that. That's disgusting. How can you eat that? Or you tell them a story about something that happened to you last week at work, and they're like, yeah, you told me that already. One comment itself isn't abusive, but when it happens all the time, the cumulative effect of that is basically invalidating and undermining and putting you down, because what you're saying is never fully received. And it does eventually get processed as a rejection of sorts over time. Now, a really good example of this is table turning, which is a form of defensiveness and a refusal to receive your feedback or own the impact that you might have had on somebody. So let's say you bring something up to your spouse, and then they bring up their complaint that they've been sitting on, and then they turn the tables on you. Or they tell you that unless you're perfect, you don't really have a leg to stand on. And that's invalidating, because it's a refusal to take in what you've shared, and it's a refusal to look for the truth in what you're saying or to receive you. And so therefore it's a block to connection that over time is extremely unloving and unkind. Now, one thing you can do to handle that is just to remember the subject if they try to turn the tables, and just say, you know what, that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm happy to hear about that later. You're welcome to bring up your concerns later. But right now, this is what I'm talking about. And then if they keep doing that, then you can just step out of the conversation and say, all right, I'm just going to take that as you're not open to hearing me right now. I'm going to take that as a no to whatever it is that you're asking. And then just disconnect and step away from that. And protect yourself and share yourself only with people that treat you with respect. The second way of verbal abuse that's kind of sneaky is sarcasm, where they're kind of joking around and you can't tell if it's a joke, and it makes you uneasy. This could be like they're making fun of you and it's a joke that's at your expense that makes you feel laughed at. It might be that they're telling a story about something silly or stupid that you did and then laughing, and then other people are laughing and you're feeling silly or humiliated. And if you don't laugh along, then they tell you that you're too sensitive, or they tell you that you're a poor sport if you question it later. They tell you that you're paranoid or that you're reading too much into it. And they're really just dismissing how you feel about that. This can also include like a sarcastic question like, do you need me to dumb that down for you? Or if you make a mistake and they say, well, what a surprise, who would have ever thought that would happen? And that kind of sarcasm it's just a put down. It really is. And what you can do to sidestep that is to just call it out. Do not feel pressure to go along with it. And have a boundary for yourself around, like, I don't really respond to sarcasm. I can't control what you say or do, but I'm not going to respond to that, and I'm not going to play a part in that. The third sneaky form of verbal abuse are rhetorical questions that they ask you that are designed to prove you wrong. Did you or did you not do this thing? Right? They're asking you questions and they insist that you answer, and they're controlling the conversation in that way. And they set you up with their questions so that when you answer, then they rip on your answer. And they're trying to show you how stupid your answer is. Right? So for example, they might, ask a question like, well, let me ask you this. Why do you think that? Let me ask you what was your thinking process behind that decision? And then you answer earnestly, and then they ridicule you by saying, they can't believe that you would even think that. Or they laugh with contempt at your answer. So, you can ask yourself, so why are we having this conversation if my answers are not going to satisfy you? It's a cat and mouse game. So if they're asking rhetorical questions like that, or they're asking sarcastic questions like that, ask them why they're asking. What's their intention behind the question? Put it back on them. Or you can let them know, I'm happy to answer that if you are sharing a different viewpoint from me and you're really wanting to understand mine, but I'm not open to sharing my viewpoint or answering that question if your intention is just to show me how I'm wrong. And the thing to remember in holding this boundary for yourself is that you get to decide what kind of conversation that you will enter into and what kind of conversation that you won't enter into. And that's your basic right as an adult, right? And to know when you're getting set up. Because if you play this game with them, it's rigged against you. So you really don't want to do that. You want to recognize it and step out. The fourth thing are questions that can't be answered correctly because they're not actually real questions. They're a statement in disguise of a question. So why did you do that as an example of that kind of question? Tell me why. And then when you tell them, it doesn't make sense to them, or they think it's selfish, or they say, well, I would never do that to you. And then you realize there's really no right way to answer that question. If you find yourself answering questions and then they are continuing to make their point over and over again or asking more questions, eventually you realize it's a no-win situation. And the only thing you can possibly do is just to say, you're right. I see what you mean. That was ridiculous, right? They're not seeking to understand when they ask that question. They're just trying to be right at your expense or prove a point, even if your dignity is at stake or your reputation in their eyes is at stake. And that hurts. And so those are the kinds of things that can make you feel humiliated or put down or embarrassed or ashamed. The fifth thing is that if there's a statement where the subtext is unclear, and this is where the implication of what they want or what they mean is not clear. So you have to figure out what they mean and what is required of the situation. And if you don't, then you're going to get in trouble, so to speak. So for example, let's say come in and they say, I haven't had dinner. And you're wondering, okay, does that mean they're just telling me that so that I know why they're grumpy is because they haven't eaten yet? Or what do I do with that information? Does that mean I'm supposed to fix a plate? Does that mean I'm supposed to offer dinner? Or if they come in and they're like, hey, my show starts in 15 minutes and you're in the middle of watching something. Does that mean they're expecting me to turn off my show? And if I don't, they're going to be pissed. These are statements that are designed to get you to do something without ever asking. And it's abusive because, number one, if they don't acknowledge that they're asking for something, then if you give it and it's not acknowledged as something to, it's not something that's acknowledged as an offering, and that they don't actually appreciate it because it was never asked for, they can end up saying, you know what, I never asked you to do that. Or if you fail to pick up what they mean and you get flack for not being supportive or falling short or, something that you weren't even given the yardstick for because you got it wrong, And that's abusive. Like you're getting set up and you were supposed to know something because they didn't ask, but you failed at a question that they never asked, of a request that they never actually asked you. So, and I think that when you do things for another person and they never really have to ask for it, they never have to be vulnerable. They're not going to value what you're offering. And if you end up bringing that up later, then they're going to just be like, well, I didn't ask that of you. You chose to give that. And so then you end up looking like somebody who's just trying to get something back for something that you gave freely, and you're actually trying to win. But that sense of trying to figure out what the subtext is and knowing that you could be wrong, that creates that walking on eggshells feeling. And that is a hallmark of abuse, right? Where you know that, okay, they made a statement, there's a subtext there, I've got to figure out what that is. And if I get it wrong, I'm going to be in trouble, or our connection is going to be compromised. They're going to be pissed off at me, and then we're going to have a problem. Also, statements where there's a subtext that sounds like a neutral observation, but it's not really neutral. Like, oh, I saw you had cake yesterday and you're eating it right now too. Well, why are they saying that? There's a reason why they're saying that, but if you call it out and you're like, oh, are you saying I shouldn't eat so much cake? Are you saying that you think I'm gaining weight? Are you thinking I should eat healthier? Then they can just say, I didn't say that. What are you talking about? I was just saying, I was just making an observation. And they deny their intentions behind their words. They're either purposely being dishonest with you, or they're not even honest with themselves or in touch with their own intentions. And so they're trying to sneak in something without having to own what their message actually is. So how you can handle that is to first notice how you feel when when they do that. Tune into how you feel after an interaction with your spouse. If you notice that you're feeling hurt or run down or embarrassed or resentful or fearful, that's your first sign. And you really want to listen to that, because even if you feel that you are too sensitive based on your upbringing, any loving spouse would want to be aware of what your sensitivities are, and they would try to make you feel safe. They wouldn't rub on your raw spots on purpose and then point the finger at you for taking things too personally. Like, that's not a loving thing to do. If you tell someone that that's an area of sensitivity for you and they keep poking at it, that's abusive. It's crossing a line. It's not respectful. So you want to ask them again, like I mentioned before, what is your intention behind saying that? Why do you think you said that to me? And you want to do this because it's getting curious, not defensive. You're not hooked in, you're moving into curiosity, and you're just observing, and you're kind of putting it back on them as a way of not picking up what isn't yours to own. If they're having an issue with whatever they're observing, that's their problem. They need to tune into themselves and figure out what's at stake for them, or what meaning they're giving it, what feelings they have. Maybe they have some kind of judgment of you. Maybe they have some kind of fear. Something's going on inside of them. So you don't want to make it about you and start defending yourself or explaining yourself or trying to get them to see why you're eating that piece of cake or whatever it is that they're observing. Just ask, like, what was your hope in saying that to me? Was there something that you needed from me? Was there something you wanted from me? And they may not be able to answer you, but at least you've put the spotlight back onto their behavior and maybe planted a seed for them to think about it. And even if they don't, regardless of what they do with that, it's a way for, potentially it could create greater self-awareness in them. But it helps you to get it off of you so that you don't feel like you need to have the right answer to what they're saying, right? It's an extremely powerful thing. So if you get hooked in, there's something healed in you that needs to be addressed so that you can remain strong and clear, and with very strong energetic boundaries that allows you to give them grace around, and getting curious. I think getting curious about why they're saying something is giving grace, but you're also not accepting or playing by the rules that end up putting you down. So I think strong boundaries are really important, and that part is the inside out work and healing those areas inside of yourself so that you don't get pulled in, so that you don't end up getting defensive, so that you're able to see what's yours and what is not yours, because there's so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom in that mental clarity of knowing I don't have to respond to that. That's not mine, right? And with that internal strength, you can handle these, you can sidestep these, and you can take a stand and make sure that these things don't happen anymore. A lot of times a spouse will recognize and will get more attuned to what's going on inside of them when you call these things out with love. So that's it, you guys. If you are looking for support around this stuff, if you feel like you need extra support, you are welcome to book a call with me at monikahoyt.com/talk. And in this call, I will help you kind of get clear on what is going on in the dynamics of your relationship specifically, what your goals are, how to remove the barriers, how to sidestep some of these things, get really clear on what's really going on, and then create a plan for you given your unique situation. If it's not a fit to work together, I will let you know that and I'll point you in the right direction. If it's something that I can help you with, I'll let you know. But either way, it's something that we can get clarity on the call around. So that's monikahoyt.com/talk. And if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to put them in the comments below and I will respond. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next time.